Welcome, curious minds, to another profound journey here on the Deep Dive. Today, we're not just scratching the surface, we're diving deep, really deep, into the very architecture of how we understand anything at all. We're asking a question, I think, that's so fundamental it underpins everything we believe we know. How do we truly make sense of the world around us? And what are the invisible structures, in our minds, in our language, that actually make knowledge possible? We're peeling back the layers on perception, meaning truth itself, exploring the very fabric of our knowledge.
That's exactly right. And our sources for this deep dive, well, they offer a truly fascinating philosophical expedition right into these foundations. It's about how we construct our reality, not just, passively observe it. We'll be drawing from this incredibly in-depth exploration, core themes shaping our understanding of meaning, perception, truth, guiding us far beyond surface-level stuff. Our mission today really is to clarify that intricate, often unseen dance between our raw experiences and the structured objects of our knowledge, illuminating the hidden mechanisms by which we grasp the world. It's about understanding the very blueprint of understanding itself.
And what a blueprint it is. Wow. Okay, so over the next while, we're going to explore everything from the basic building blocks of what things are, how they relate as wholes and parts, not just physically, but like conceptually too. Then we'll move to how our minds actually grasp these objects and concepts. Through language, through meaning, we'll dive into the very nature of consciousness itself. What does it even mean to be aware? And it all culminates, really, in this revealing look at how we achieve genuine insight, genuine understanding, moving from just using symbols to truly deeply knowing the thing itself. It's going to be intense, yeah, but I think incredibly rewarding, exploring the very tools you use to think every single day. So let's buckle up and get started. Okay, let's unpack this. Our first major topic, the fundamental architecture, wholes, parts, and essential dependencies. Now, this might sound a bit abstract, I know, but it's about the very basic way objects relate to one another. And crucially, this relationship isn't just something we happen to notice. It has what's called an a priori basis, meaning it's like inherently true about how things are structured, not something we just learn through trial and error. So to start, when we talk about a part, what do we mean? Well, we're defining it in the widest possible sense. Basically, anything you can distinguish in an object. This could be a physical piece, sure, like a fragment of broken plate, that's obvious, but it could also be an abstract quality. Think about, say, redness as a moment of color within a sensory phenomenon. You don't just see red in a void, right? You see a red car or a red apple. That redness is a part, a moment of that bigger perception. Or consider the spatial configuration of a chair, its specific arrangement of legs, seat, back. That configuration is a proper part of the whole chair. It helps make the chair what it is. So it's about recognizing all the components, tangible and intangible, that make up a complete thing, even stuff you can't physically pick up.
That's precisely the foundation we need. Yes. And this wide definition of part, it leads us straight to a really critical distinction. The distinction between independent and non-independent contents, or objects. Okay, so independent contents. These are things that can be conceived as existing entirely by themselves, in isolation. Our source gives a pretty vivid example, a head. Now, when you see a head, okay, it's almost always attached to a body, right? And it exists within some visual background. The philosophical point here is that you can imagine a head existing independently. Think of a sculpture, or even just conceptually. Imagine if everything outside it were just annihilated. Its fundamental nature doesn't inherently forbid solitary existence. It could still be what it is, a head, even if nothing else was around. It stands on its own, conceptually speaking. But then on the flip side, we have non-independent contents. And these are fascinating because they simply cannot be conceived as self-existent. Their very nature forbids isolated existence. They fundamentally require a substrate or some complementary matter to exist. They need something else to sort of cling to be in. Let's take redness again. You can't just have pure redness floating in the void. It makes no sense. Redness cannot exist without extension, without taking up some space, or without being a quality of some colored expanse. Similarly, extension itself, just pure space, can't exist without some quality, like shape or color or texture. And you definitely can't imagine a movement without a moving body, right? The movement is of the body. It absolutely needs that body to even happen.
Okay, so it's not just about what we happen to see together, like heads usually being on bodies. It's deeper than that. It's inherent.
Exactly. Precisely. This isn't just a contingency of our subjective thinking or, something we notice through repeated observation. This distinction is an a priori necessity, meaning it's a truth grounded in the pure essence of things themselves. It's true by virtue of what these things are. Think about the philosopher Stumpf's observation he made. The moments of quality and extension, like, say, color and the space it occupies, they're utterly inseparable. You can't diminish one without affecting the other. If you make a red patch smaller, you're not just reducing its extension, you're also changing the way that specific red quality manifests. It shows this inherent necessary bond. Or consider the intensity of a musical tone. It's intrinsically tied to its quality, its pitch. You can't have a loud or soft sound without having some specific tone, like a middle C or something. Eliminate one, the pitch or volume, and the other vanishes too. This isn't just an empirical fact we observe, it's a necessary truth of their essences. They are fundamentally codependent.
That's a really sharp way to put it. How deeply intertwined these non-independent elements are. It really highlights how we often take things for granted. It makes me wonder, though, if something can't stand alone in reality, how do we even perceive it distinctly? Is there a difference between what we can, like, notice versus what we could actually present in isolation?
Oh, there absolutely is a difference, yeah. And this takes us right into the nuances of perception. What can be noticed by itself often differs quite significantly from what can be presented by itself in isolation. Think of your striking red car again. The redness, as a non-independent moment, can certainly be noticed. It stands out within the whole car. Your attention is drawn to it. But the color itself, the redness, it can't be presented in isolation in the same way that the car, as an independent object, theoretically could be if everything around it vanished. The car, as a physical thing, could still be what it is, the red by itself. Well, it simply is not in that same self-sufficient way. It always needs to be the red of something.
Okay. So like a red dot on a white page, I notice the red, for sure, but it's still the red of the dot. I can't mentally or physically extract just the redness and hold it. That's a great analogy. Yeah, that helps clarify how we attend to these dependent qualities.
Precisely. And building on that, there's another related but distinct idea we should touch on. It's the idea of intuitively separated versus intuitively blended contents. Okay, so intuitively separated contents are those that don't just flow over into others. There's a clear point of difference, a boundary. Imagine the distinct tiles in a mosaic. Each piece maintains its boundary, is clearly cut off from the next. Intuitively blended contents, on the other hand, they form a whole, but they aren't sharply cut off. They blend seamlessly with their associates. Think about the individual parts of a continuously shaded white surface. You can distinguish parts, maybe lighter and darker areas, but there's no sharp line between them. They flow into each other. Now, here's a crucial point. An independent content, like a piece of that white surface, which you could theoretically cut out, can still be unseparated or blended within the larger surface. This shows us that these are two different distinctions, right? They cut across each other. They describe the nuanced ways parts form wholes. An independent content might be an unseparated part of a larger whole, but it could still theoretically exist on its own if that whole were removed. So the separation blending distinction refers more to the boundaries within our perception, while the independence-non-independence distinction refers to the essential nature of the part itself. Can it, in principle, exist alone?
Wow. Okay, that's a lot to chew on, right? This fundamental understanding of what can and cannot stand alone, whether something is independent or non-independent, separated or blended, it really does start to reshape how we perceive the world. And it's not just about physical objects, is it? It applies to qualities, relations, maybe even our own thoughts. You start to see how certain ideas or concepts maybe can exist in your mind without others being there too. Like, you can't really imagine laughter without a person laughing, can you? The laughter seems utterly dependent on the individual. This framework, it feels like it helps us discern what's fundamental versus what's just a dependent attribute in any situation. Whether you're understanding emotions or analyzing complex systems, it truly makes you wonder. How many of our daily observations about the world are truly about self-existent things? And how many are really about these moments that are utterly dependent on a larger context? What stands out to you listening now in this initial framework? How might it change how you look at, I don't know, the mundane objects around you right now? Okay, now let's shift our focus a bit. We've talked about the architecture of objects, the physical and qualitative stuff. Now let's look at the deep structure of meaning and language. We've seen how things relate out there in the world. Now, how do these ideas of dependency show up in the realm of what we say and think? We're going to explore the distinction between independent and non-independent meanings and dive into this fascinating idea of pure grammar. It's really about how language on a fundamental level isn't just arbitrary sounds or symbols. It actually reflects deep truths about how our minds organize reality and create meaning.
Indeed. And this takes us into what might seem, at first glance, like insignificant grammatical distinctions. Things teachers might correct you on, like the difference between catagrammatic and syncatagrammatic expressions. But these actually reflect profound semantic divisions in how we process and communicate meaning. Okay, so independent or catagrammatic meanings correspond to complete expressions that can stand alone. Think of words like window, head, or king. They directly name objects or concepts that, as we discussed, can be conceived on their own. If I just say window, you have a complete concept. It's self-sufficient in its meaning. In contrast, non-independent or syncatagrammatic meanings, well, they cannot stand alone. They inherently require completion. They function only as formal constituents within expressions that have independent meanings. Consider words like but or fathers, or even prefixes and suffixes like un or gigness. A conjunction like but has a definite meaning, right? It signals a contrast or an exception, but its meaning intrinsically looks forward to completion. It implies a relation between two clauses or ideas. You can't just say but and have a complete thought. It needs something like, I like apples, but I prefer oranges. It connects things.
So it's not that but is meaningless, like just a random sound, but its meaning is inherently relational. It's incomplete on its own.
Exactly. It has a meaning content, definitely, but that content intrinsically demands something else to connect to. This is very different from, say, a verbal fragment like foo, which is simply meaningless on its own. It's not even a proper word, just sounds. So while foo is incomplete because it's not a word, but is incomplete because its meaning itself demands something else, it performs a definite semantic role, always playing the same kind of part in countless sentences, linking, contrasting, modifying, whatever it might be. These syncatagrammatic expressions are like the glue and the modifiers of language. They give structure and nuance to the independent meanings.
That's a really crucial distinction, and it highlights something you hear sometimes, a kind of misconception, that the complexity of meanings always directly mirrors the complexity of the objects they represent. But that's not necessarily true, is it?
No, it's definitely not. And our source gives a great counterexample here. The expression simple object itself, think about it, is a complex meaning. It involves the concept of an object and the quality of being simple. Two distinct conceptual elements combined, so the meaning is complex. Yet it refers to a simple object, something without parts, without further distinctions in reality. This clearly shows a non-parallelism, right, between the structure of the meaning in our minds or language and the structure of the object itself. The way we think or talk about something isn't always a direct mirror of the thing itself. Sometimes we need complex linguistic tools to grasp something fundamentally simple.
That's really helpful, yeah. It means we have to be careful not to sort of conflate how we describe something with what that something actually is. And building on that, what about proper names like John or London? They seem pretty straightforward, right? Just labels.
No.
But our sources suggest there's still a layer of complexity there, too.
That's right. Even within seemingly simple terms like proper names, we find a rich complexity, though maybe not where you'd first expect it. A proper name like Schultz, using the example from the text, has a simple meaning in its intrinsic essence. It directly names a particular person. Its core function is just to refer, to point. However, the consciousness of meaning for a proper name, how we experience that meaning, often has complexity. This comes through its wider intentional background of content. That sounds fancy, but it just refers to the variable ways we might present Schultz to ourselves, maybe as an A, which is a human being with specific characteristics like being tall, a doctor, living down the street. We might associate Schultz with a whole host of descriptions and attributes based on our experience.
Ah, I see. So the name itself is simple in its job, just pointing. But our understanding or mental image of the person named becomes richer through all these associations we layer on.
Precisely. And the key insight here is that these descriptive elements, tall, doctor, neighbor, they're not really implicit in the proper meaning of Schultz itself. The name doesn't contain those meanings. They are rather new meanings that emerge through explication, through our analysis, and additional ways of presenting or thinking about Schultz. The underlying proper meaning of the name, its direct reference, remains simple, even as our understanding of the object name becomes much richer and more complex. It's like the name is just the pointer, and all the descriptive content is built around what that pointer indicates, not inside the pointer itself.
Okay. And this brings us to the really powerful idea of pure grammar in organizing meanings. This isn't just about syntax rules, like where to put a comma or subject-verb agreement. Pure grammar, in this context, dictates the a priori patterns, the inherent rules in which meanings can unite to form a single significant meaning. It guards against sheer senselessness. gibberish, basically. And this is different from a logical contradiction, or Widersen, that German term meaning countersense or formal absurdity. Widersen relates to violations of logical laws like saying a square is round. That's contradictory, but we understand what square and round mean individually. But something like Chomsky's famous colorless green ideas sleep furiously, that's not even a coherent thought to begin with. It breaks the fundamental rules of how meanings can combine. Pure grammar is about what can even be a potential thought before we even get to asking if it's logically true or false.
Yes, exactly. The distinction between sense and nonsense is absolutely fundamental. It comes before logic. Pure grammar establishes what is possible in terms of meaningful unity. Can these concepts even stick together coherently? It concerns the consistency or absurdity of meanings, which expresses an objective, a priori possibility or impossibility of being. Can this state of affairs even be? And this depends on the intrinsic essence of the meanings themselves. For example, if I combine happiness with a rock, pure grammar tells me that a rock is happy, is fundamentally flawed. It's senseless, not just logically false, but category error. Rocks, by their nature, don't belong in the category of things that can be happy. These semantic categories define the possible structures of thought, ensuring that our expressions can form coherent meanings in the first place. And the laws of pure logic, the ones that prevent formal absurdity like A and not A, they actually presuppose these more basic grammatical laws. You can't even get to a logical contradiction if the very combination of words is nonsensical from the start.
Right. So understanding these distinctions, independent versus non-independent meanings, how proper names work, the role of pure grammar, it fundamentally helps us recognize the underlying structure of thought itself. It allows us to build coherent arguments, sure, but maybe just as importantly, it helps us identify the sources of confusion and breakdown in communication, both in others and ourselves. It's about knowing why some sentences just don't make sense, not just that they don't. That feels like a powerful tool for clarity. It lets us ask, okay, is the statement I'm hearing logically false, or is it actually fundamentally incoherent from a purely grammatical, meaning-based perspective? Am I dealing with a contradiction or just noise? We've talked about the architecture of objects, the deep structure of language. Now let's turn inward. Let's look at the very nature of our minds and ask, what does it actually mean to be conscious? And here's where it gets really profound, I think, because it's this idea that consciousness isn't like a box or a container, but it is always consciousness of something.
This is absolutely central. It's Husserl's crucial concept of intentionality. Consciousness is fundamentally a directedness or a reference to an object. It's not a self-contained bubble. It's inherently about something, whether that something is external or even internal, like reflecting on our own thoughts. Think of it like a flashlight beam. It doesn't just exist as a beam, it's always pointing at something, illuminating it. This concept was deeply influenced by Brentano, who made this key distinction between psychical and physical phenomena. Psychical phenomena, which are mental acts like thinking, seeing, judging, wishing, they are uniquely characterized by intentionally containing objects in themselves. So for instance, when you see a figure, say, a tree, the tree itself is a physical phenomenon out there. But the act of seeing that tree, the mental act of perceiving, that is a psychical phenomenon. And it intentionally contains the tree within its directedness. The object, the tree, isn't physically inside your act of seeing, obviously, but it is present to the act intentionally. Your seeing is of that tree.
Okay, so it's less about consciousness having objects stuffed inside it and more about consciousness being directed towards objects. It's an active pointing. This also helps clarify the different ways we use the word consciousness, doesn't it? Like consciousness as a stream of experiences. Often when we talk about consciousness, we mean it as the real unity of experiences, right? All the interconnected occurrences that make up our mental life, our perceptions, thoughts, feelings, hopes, fears, wishes, all these fleeting or lasting occurrences are experiences or contents of consciousness. They're the raw data, the felt quality. But then there's the ego, the I that seems to be having these experiences. And the phenomenologically reduced ego, as the text puts it, turns out not to be some weird floating principle or a separate little man in the head looking out. Instead, it's simply the unified sum total of these law-bound contents, the interconnected unity of our experiences themselves. It's the structured whole of all these flowing mental events that constitutes our sense of self.
That's a vital clarification, absolutely, because it leads us directly to distinguish between what our source calls real or reellen content and intentional content. This is crucial. The real or reellen phenomenological content refers to the actual concrete or abstract parts that constitute the mental act itself. These are things like the specific sound patterns we hear, or the particular sensations of color and shape we see, or the feeling of warmth we feel. The raw lived experience. These are really given in experience. They are the actual stuff, the fabric of our lived-through mental occurrences. For example, when you hear the word apple, the real content is the actual sound pattern, the acoustic event, the auditory sensations produced. Those sensations are the actual stuff of your hearing experience right now. In contrast, the intentional content is what the act refers to or means. It's the objective, interpretative sense of the act. Using the same example for the heard word apple, the intentional content is its meaning the concept of an apple, that particular kind of fruit, or maybe the specific red apple you're thinking of right now. This intentional content is not really present in the act as a constituent part, like a sensation is. It's not made of sound stuff. Instead, it is what the act is about. So when you hear the word tree, the real content is the specific sound vibrations and auditory sensations in your ear and mind right now. That's the concrete event. But the intentional content is the concept of a tree, which is not a part of your auditory sensation, but what that sensation means for you, what it points to. It's the object of your thought, not the raw material of your thinking.
That is a really powerful distinction for understanding how our minds work. It's not just passively receiving information like a camera. It's actively interpreting and directing our awareness. So if I'm looking at a beautiful sunset, the colors and light hitting my eyes, those sensations are the real content, the actual sensory input. But my appreciation of the sunset, my judgment that it's beautiful, that's the intentional content. It's what my mind is doing with those sensations, the meaning it finds.
Precisely. Exactly right. And we see this directedness, this intentionality, manifest in all sorts of different act characters of intentional experiences. Think about the various modes of objective intention. Perceiving, imagining, judging, delighting, wishing, hoping, fearing. Each of these is a distinct intentional experience, a specific way of entertaining an object in thought. It's not just that we have a general consciousness. It's always a particular kind of consciousness with a specific character, directed at a specific object or state of affairs. And the key insight here is that feelings like pleasure or states like conviction, they demand a relation to something pleasing or something one is convinced of. They were simply unthinkable apart from their object. You can't just have a free-floating feeling of pleasure with no object. It must be pleasure in something, of something. You're pleased by the sunset or convinced that the argument is sound.
That's a fascinating point. Yeah, I can't really imagine a desire that isn't a desire for something specific, or a belief that isn't a belief in something, or that something is true.
Absolutely. The very essence of pleasure or conviction is its directedness towards an object. And this applies broadly to other experiences too, like desire or approval or hope. There's no desire whose specific character can do without something desired, no approval without something approved of, no hope without something hoped for. These are all genuine acts in this philosophical sense, owing their intentional relation to certain underlying presentations or thoughts. They themselves really now have what they owe to something else. They're built upon that directedness. Now, this fundamental understanding of intentionality, this idea that our consciousness is always a directedness towards an object, it raises a really important reflective question, doesn't it? What does this imply about the nature of our subjective experience and its relationship to an objective world? If our minds are inherently outward pointing, how much of what we experience as being out there is shaped by the inherent directedness and structures of our own minds, and how much is truly independent of us? It's a profound thought that really bridges the subjective and the objective.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. This feels like the culmination of everything we've discussed so far. Having laid the groundwork of parts and wholes, meaning, language, intentionality, we now turn to the pinnacle, the ladder of knowledge, from empty signification to full intuition. This is all about how our meaning intentions, our thoughts and concepts, gain substance, how we genuinely come to know something, moving from just using mere symbols or words to directly apprehending the thing itself. It's about that moment when a concept truly clicks.
Exactly. And this brings us to the crucial concept of fulfillment. It's a key term here. Fulfillment is the process where a meaning intention, maybe thinking of a number symbolically like 53 to the power of 4, which is just a string of symbols you manipulate, meets an intuitive experience. Now, this intuitive experience could be visually seeing the number's components laid out, or maybe conceptually elaborating its definition step by step until it becomes concrete and clear for us. The experience of fulfillment is often accompanied by that profound, almost visceral sense of, this is the thing itself. You know that feeling?
Well, yeah, the aha moment.
Yeah, that's it. It's that aha moment. It brings clarity. It offers a fullness that moves us from what's called empty signification, where we merely use a sign or word without truly grasping its referent in a rich way, to a full intuitive illustration, where the object or concept is truly given to us, directly experienced or apprehended.
So it's kind of like the difference between just reading a recipe, which is the empty signification, the symbols on the page, and actually tasting the finished dish. The taste is the fulfillment.
That's a perfect analogy, yes. And importantly, fulfillment isn't usually an all-or-nothing thing. It admits of degrees. There are gradations of fullness, ranging from immediate or indirect fulfillment all the way up to immediate intuition, which is the most direct kind of knowing. Think of that complex mathematical concept again, like 53 to the power of 4. Initially, it's just a symbol, mostly empty for most of us. We might clarify it by breaking it down, maybe thinking 53, 53, 53, 53. Each step provides richer fulfillment. Then we clarify 53 by defining it as 5 tens and 3 ones, maybe visualizing those quantities and so on, until, in principle, we could reach the number itself in its most basic constituents. Each step in this chain brings us closer, adding more intuitive substance, moving from the purely symbolic towards the directly comprehensible. Now, at the extremes of the spectrum, we have pure intuition versus pure signification. Pure intuition directly presents its object. The object is directly seen, felt, heard, or apprehended in its full reality. Think of actually seeing a specific blue chair right here in front of you. That's intuition. Pure signification, conversely, is an empty act. It's merely using a symbol, a word, a thought that requires intuitive support to gain full meaning and weight. It's like thinking of a blue chair in general, without any particular one in mind, just using the concept. Our source aptly illustrates this with a kind of symbolic equation, I plus S equals 1, where I represents the intuitive weight or substance, and S represents the signitive, symbolic, or empty weight. They add up to the total substance of any given presentation or thought. This means every presentation we have, every thought or perception, it has both an intuitive aspect, what's immediately apparent and directly given, and a signitive aspect, what's subsidiarily meant, implied, represented by a symbol. And the balance between them, the I and the S, can constantly shift depending on how clearly and directly we grasp the object in question.
Wow, that's such an evocative image, the weights of intuitive and signitive substance in every thought. It really reminds me of those moments when a complex idea, which maybe I've only known through symbols or definitions from a book, finally clicks into place, usually because I encounter a real-world example or a really good analogy that makes it concrete, fills it with intuitive weight. But okay, to truly know something in this full sense means more than just having any old sensory experience, right?
Yeah.
We need to distinguish different types of intuition that are crucial for building knowledge. There's sensuous intuition, first off,
Yeah.
which sounds like our ordinary perception, right? Where an object is given through sensory data like seeing an ink pot, hearing a specific melody, feeling the texture of fabric. Here, the perceived object is present in propria persona, as text as a Latin phrase meaning in its own person. It's directly there in its full-bodied existence right before our senses. But then, and this is maybe the really mind-bending part, there's categorical intuition. This is described as a truly radical extension of intuition, going beyond the merely sensory. This is where we somehow perceive or behold with evidence abstract relations, connections, or logical forms themselves, as if they were objects, too. It's not just seeing a red ball, but intuiting the identity of that ball with itself, or the relation of conjunction between two things. For example, when we realize A is A, we are not merely sensing the object A through our eyes or ears. We are somehow intuiting the identity itself as an object, though it's an object of a special kind of act, a founded act, an act that builds on other acts. Or consider the sentence A and B. The end is not a sensuous object that you can point to physically, like A or B themselves. It's a categorical form, a relationship, and we apprehend it through a founded act. Similarly, in gold is yellow. We don't just sense gold and sense yellowness separately. We intuit the gold being yellow as a state of affairs, as a fact or relation that is directly apprehended, seen with the mind's eye, so to speak. It's like a mental leap from just observing things to understanding how they relate.
Exactly. And these categorical intuitions, as you said, are what we call founded acts. They are quite literally founded on sensuous intuitions. They represent a whole new level of objective awareness that arises from, but absolutely goes beyond, what is immediately sensed. Think of seeing two separate chairs in a room. You perceive chair 1 and you perceive chair 2. Those are your basic sensuous intuitions. But then you intuit the relationship of chair 1 is next to chair 2. Now, is next to isn't a physical object you can touch or see in the same way you see the chairs themselves. It's a categorical connection, a spatial relation. And that intuition, that grasp of the relation, is founded upon your perception of the individual chairs. The mechanism here, essentially, is that the mental character of the categorical form whether it's identity, attribution, conjunction, narration, is phenomenologically bound to the acts in which objects are constituted, like perceiving chair 1, perceiving chair 2, not directly to the raw sensuous contents, the color shapes themselves. The sense contents are representatively present. They contribute to these acts, but they don't make up the characteristic essence of the categorical insight. The categorical moment connects the intentional materials of the founding acts, not their raw sensuous contents. It's a higher order operation. And this is what allows us to grasp abstract concepts and relations in an intuitive, self-evident manner, building complex knowledge from simpler perceptions.
So if I understand correctly, when I look at a complex graph, say plotting sales over time, and I suddenly see the trend, not just the individual data points scattered around, but the overall upward trajectory, that seeing the trend, that grasp of the pattern, that is a categorical intuition, founded on my sensuous intuition of all those individual dots and lines. That's incredibly insightful, if so.
That's a perfect example. Exactly. You're perceiving a relationship, a pattern, an abstract structure that isn't a single sensory object, but an overarching form that emerges from the data. Now, finally, within this whole ladder of knowledge, we also need to distinguish between adequate and inadequate intuition. Adequate perception is the ideal limit. It's the ultimate goal of knowing, you could say. It's where the object is exhaustively apprehended, completely grasped, and the intuitively presenting content coincides perfectly with the perceived object itself. There's no gap, no remainder. This is described as absolute knowledge, where that old phrase, adequatio rea intellectus, the correspondence of thing and intellect, is fully given and directly seized upon, experienced. This is the moment of complete clarity and understanding, where nothing is left hidden, nothing is left merely signative or unfulfilled. It's the ideal. Most of our everyday experience, however, let's be honest, falls into inadequate perception. That's just the reality. This is usually an adumbration, a partial view, a sketch, where some intentions are fulfilled but others are not yet given. They remain empty or merely anticipated. Think again about looking at a physical object like a house. You only ever see one side at a time. Your perception is always partial. Each percept is a mixture of fulfilled intentions, which you see right now, and unfulfilled intentions. You anticipate the back, the inside, which are not yet visible, but are part of the object. Even something like a rough drawing of a mathematical curve can serve as an analogical intuition of a universal concept. It provides inadequate, perhaps, but still intuitive knowledge. It gives you some grasp. It represents a partial understanding, a step on the path towards a more complete apprehension. And these partial intuitions, even when they might seem a bit confused or combine incompatible elements in the initial stages of grasping something complex, they can still form a basis for recognition and guide us toward a fuller, more adequate understanding later on.
Wow. This entire framework, this whole ladder of knowledge from empty signification through fulfillment, distinguishing sensuous and categorical intuition, all the way to this ideal of adequate intuition. It's incredibly powerful, isn't it? It allows us to reflect on our own moments of, aha, those flashes of genuine understanding when something finally clicks. It reveals that deeply understanding a concept or a relationship or even an identity is this complex, structured, and very active process. It's a building process, right? Starting from basic sensory experience and moving up through layers of these founded acts to higher order categorical insights. It really illuminates the fundamental difference between merely processing information, maybe just receiving a symbolic representation, like reading words, and truly knowing something. Where the object itself is given in its fullness, intuitively grasped, it makes you reconsider what it means to actually know what you're talking about, rather than just, repeating information you've heard or read. So we've journeyed through the foundational structures of objects, the deep grammar of meaning, the intentional directedness of consciousness, and this layered path to knowledge through intuition and fulfillment. It's been quite a meticulous mapping, hasn't it, of the structures of experience, meaning, and how we genuinely come to know things. It truly feels like a way of understanding how your own mind builds understanding brick by brick.
Indeed. And understanding these distinctions between independent and non-independent contents, between simple and complex meanings, and especially that profound difference between sensuous and categorical intuition, it's far more than just some academic exercise, I think. It really illuminates the very mechanisms by which we perceive, judge, and ultimately construct our understanding of reality, day to day. It shows us that genuine knowledge isn't passive reception. It requires an active, structured process of fulfillment and apprehension, where our intentions meet intuitive illustration, leading eventually, hopefully, to clarity and insight. We've seen how what we experience as a direct apprehension of abstract relations or logical forms is actually founded upon more basic sensuous experiences, yet it transcends them into a completely new kind of objective awareness. This framework really provides a toolkit, doesn't it, for analyzing the quality of your own knowledge in different areas.
That's a really important point. Yeah, a toolkit. And it naturally sparks a deeper question, I think, for all of us listening to consider. How much of our everyday knowledge actually remains at the level of empty signification? Just using words, symbols, concepts without a full intuitive grasp of what they really mean or point to. And how much of it involves true, fulfilling intuition, where we genuinely experience the thing itself, or at least move closer to it? What would it take for you to strive for more adequate understanding in your own life in areas that matter to you? Moving beyond mere words to truly apprehending the essence of things, relations, or ideas. How many of your own beliefs are founded primarily on immediate sensory experience, and how many rest on a perhaps less examined but maybe profound grasp of those higher order categorical relations? It's a challenge, isn't it, to constantly seek deeper meaning, deeper understanding in everything you encounter, moving from just hearing the name of something to truly trying to know its heart. We hope this deep dive has given you plenty to think about and perhaps, yeah, a new lens through which to examine your own understanding of the world. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep